You're watching the State Senate District 31 debate live from the Anwar Family Studio at Basin PBS in community partnership with the League of Women Voters of Midland, graciously underwritten by S. Javed Anwar and Midland Energy, Inc.
Good evening, and welcome to Basin PBS, where we are coming to you live from the Anwar Family Studio. I'm Becky Ferguson, a member of the Basin PBS board, and on behalf of the board, thank you for joining us tonight. We are honored to host the Republican primary State Senate District 31 debate this evening. There is no contested race for this position in the Democratic primary. Basin PBS is known for our quality programming, which includes entertainment and education. Tonight's program is a continuation of our mission to educate and inform. This program is made possible by our members and Mr. S. Javed Anwar and Midland Energy, Inc., who is underwriting our debate series this spring, and our community partner, the Midland League of Women Voters. In an abundance of caution related to COVID, we do not have a large studio audience this evening, but each candidate was permitted to invite a small number of associates. We are thrilled to have all of you, our Basin PBS supporters, watching at home on channels 13 or 36 or live on our Facebook page. We encourage you to submit questions for our candidates, and we will do our best to ask them live tonight. Joining me tonight at the moderator's desk is our lead moderator for tonight's debate, former Basin PBS board member and publisher of the Odessa American, Mr. Pat Canty, and Midland League of Women Voters president, Ms. Emily Holiva. Pat?
Thank you, Becky. Tonight's debate will be 60 minutes with 1 2-minute break. As Becky mentioned, if you have a question that you would like to have the candidates answer, please post it on our Basin PBS Facebook page, and we'll do our best to get it answered. Now, we'll begin tonight's debate by giving each candidate, in order of their appearance on the ballot, 2 minutes for opening remarks. After these opening remarks, the moderators shall pose a series of general questions. Each candidate will have 1 minute to respond to each question. Now, in the event a candidate's answer to a question invokes the name or policy position of one or more opponents, the moderators, at our sole discretion, can give the referenced opponent 30 seconds to respond. It is important to note an individual candidate may also be asked a direct question because of a statement or policy position that he or she has made during the campaign. The candidate will have 1 minute to answer that direct question as well, and the 30-second rebuttal rule shall still apply. At the conclusion of tonight's questions, each candidate will have 1 minute for closing remarks.
We would like to remind everyone that this is a live broadcast. Flash photography, making loud noises, or other disruptive actions or comments are not allowed. Now, let's meet our 4 candidates vying for the Republican nomination for the 31st District of the Texas Senate. Ladies and gentlemen, please join us in welcoming Tim Reed, Jesse Quackenbush.
Good evening.
Stormy Bradley, and Kevin Sparks. Mr. Reed, we will begin with your opening remarks. A reminder, you have 2 minutes.
As a proud Reagan Republican, I am running a campaign on common sense and civility. Common sense tells us that what we want in a representative is someone who's experienced, qualified, and their own person. There are many challenges that this state faces, but I want to cover just 3. Public safety, whether it's border safety or our own personal safety, is of utmost importance for us. 3 times I swore to defend our Constitution and to serve and to protect you. And I faithfully executed that for 32 years. I served West Texas for 20 years, and I was promoted and ran 2 IT projects concerning information sharing that connected the 19,000 law enforcement agencies in the United States. During this time, I fought terrorism and secured our nation in Iraq, Pakistan, Indonesia, Southern Africa, and South America. With what I've seen and experienced around the world, I will always defend the Second Amendment. Public education is a Texas constitutional requirement. We have a good public education system that we need to make better. Our children and grandchildren deserve a safe and secure place to be educated. Over my career, I was on the Canyon School Board. I was the Region 16 representative to TASB, and I am now a director of athletics and campus safety and a teacher. Our child welfare system is broken. Our foster kids, next to the unborn, are the most underrepresented and most vulnerable in our society. This is an issue that is very dear to my heart because I grew up in foster care. I know what it's like not to have a safe and secure environment to grow and to be educated in. I was on the CPS board in Potter and Randall County for 9 years, a youth director in my church, a big brother, and co-founder of Amarillo Area CASA. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Quackenbush, your opening remarks.
Thank you for having all of us. We really appreciate the opportunity to speak directly to the voters. My name is Jesse Quackenbush. I'm running for this office because I'm very, very concerned about what's happening not only in America, but in Texas. Also, what's happening within our Republican Party. It seems like we've had a lot of fractionalization lately, and I want to address all of these issues. But before we do that during the process of this debate, I want to invite everyone at home to go to my website so you can begin to look at the issues and see what my plans are, specific plans to address these problems. My website is jquackenbush4 Senate.com. Again, jquackenbush4 Senate.com. So why am I qualified to run for the Senate? So I am the only candidate that I'm aware of that has a bachelor's degree in political science. I'm the only candidate that has a law degree. I'm the only candidate for the last 34 years that's actually been fighting in courts throughout the state of Texas for families, for working people, for small businesses, and for landowners. And this is what I want to do in the Senate, is to carry forward that mission of representing those constituents, not big business, not big insurance, not big oil, not big anything other than big people. I have, for the last 34 years, fought hard as a trial lawyer. I am a good trial lawyer. I've tried close to 300 jury trials throughout my career. Hopefully I'll get to 400. But over the course of those 34 years, I've learned a lot about litigating with people very similar to what we'll have on the Senate floor when I'm arguing for the folks of the 31st District. I think that my skill set of having a knowledge of the law, having practiced in the law, having a keen awareness of what the politics are in the state of Texas, I think that puts me in a better position than any of the other candidates to take off on day one and represent the 31st District. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Bradley, your opening remarks.
Good evening. Thank you so much for having me. I am an everyday, hardworking Texan with a passion to serve everyday, hardworking Texans. When you are selecting a senator or any other elected official to represent you, you are looking for someone that represents your interests and your values. My values are integrity, grit, and accountability. You want a senator that will deliver on their promises. You want someone you can trust to make the right decisions for you and your family without compromising. This is a rural district. We live life differently than those in Austin and Houston. We have grit because it's required to flourish out here. We value handshakes and integrity. We believe in a good, hard day's work. We want our kids to grow up with a strong work ethic and a servant's heart. You want an elected official that has the same values as you, that will fight for you the way you would fight for yourself. It's time that we get someone who will represent us and our values and our generations to come. I am a wife, mother, business owner, and community servant, including the hospital board and my school board. And I look forward to serving the districts and the District 31 citizens.
Thank you. Mr. Sparks, your opening remarks, please.
I, too, appreciate you all having this forum. It's important that we have an informed electorate. So my name is Kevin Sparks, and I'm running for Senate State District 31. It represents 45 counties from the Panhandle to the Permian. I'm running to keep Texas, Texas. I'm very blessed. I've been married to my cute wife, Jill, for more than 30 years. We have 4 wonderful kids. The youngest is a sophomore in college, which kind of has given us the opportunity now to, and really the motivation to go serve the people of District 31 in Austin. I believe our conservative values and principles need to be represented on all issues facing the state, because what we have today can be gone tomorrow. I want to touch briefly on 4 issues. Number 1, parents' rights. I believe parents have the right and the obligation to know what their kids are being taught. Marxist race theorists have no place in public education. The border. I've been down to the border and seen, been briefed on Operation Lone Star. I'm thankful that the legislature has budgeted an extra $3 billion. And I believe we have to do everything we can do to keep illegal crossings there at the border. Property tax, number 3. I believe property taxes have to be corrected. They're on an unsustainable path for our taxpayer. And 4th, the oil and gas industry. I'm the only Senate candidate, and there's currently no state senator that has any oil and gas experience. It represents more than 25% of our current economy, needs to be represented.
Thank you all so much for your opening remarks. We plan to cover a variety of topics this evening, including roads, water, border security, workforce availability and training, critical race theory, and state mandates. But let's start with education. One of the state's major responsibilities is the education of its citizens. Though the legislature has increased school funding in recent years, Texas ranks 41st in per pupil expenditures. And we have a very challenging student population. 80% of net new enrollment over the past 10 years is economically disadvantaged. 20% have language barriers. 11% had no connection to a school during COVID. Given these challenges and our record of low per pupil spending, what should the legislature do to make sure Texas has a well-educated citizenry and workforce? We're going to start with you, Mr. Reed.
All right, thank you. Well, and you're right that education is one of the most important things we do here in the state, because our kids are our most important resource. The first thing that we need to do is increase the per child monies that we already allocate. Money isn't always the answer to things. There are other social issues that play into why Texas is so far behind in its education program. And so we have to look at what those social issues are and address those with other areas of the state. It's not just the Department of Education that needs to look at that. There are other areas that we have to. But the first is going to be the funding and how we get that funding. And we're going to have to look at our tax base for that.
Thank you, Mr. Reed. Mr. Quackenbush.
Okay, thank you very much for the question. So if you go to my website, jquackenbush4senate.com, I have an actual plan to increase revenues for education. It's called a litigation use tax, and I'll talk about it more later with another question. Right now, we have over 5 million students attending public schools in the state of Texas. We're spending less per student than what we spend housing criminals in prison on an annual basis. There's no way that this is justified, number one, or number two, morally responsible. We need to spend more money on our children to be in comparison with other states that aren't lagging behind. I think that I know this isn't popular with parents, but we don't test our children nearly enough. I think there's a period in our history where we weren't last in everything, when we had some standardized testings to hold our teachers accountable literally for what they're doing in the classroom. We've gotten away from that. And I think the further we get away from some type of testing, there is no accountability of the teachers, and there has to be accountability.
Ms. Bradley.
We need some sort of reset with the Board of Education. We also need to revoke the federal government and any hold that it has on our state education system. The closer that we bring government and education to the people we serve, the better.
Mr. Sparks.
Yes. So we have 4 children, and each one of our kids actually learn differently. And so I'm a proponent that we need to make all practical options for our kids. And so I would very much be in favor of creating a system that opens up new opportunities for our kids to learn, and believe that the free market system is what continues to help us get better and innovate. And I believe it's time to bring the free market to education here in Texas.
Thank you. Pat?
Thank you. Continue on the topic of education. Many West Texas school districts send tens of millions of dollars of local school tax dollars to Austin each year. Last year, for example, Midland ISD sent more than $150 million to Austin for redistribution. What plans do you have for changing school finance formulas so that local districts can keep local tax dollars for our schools? Let's see, Mr. Quackenbush, we'll start with you.
Sure. So if you go to my website again, jquackenbush4senate.com, I have a very specific plan laid out called a litigation use tax. There is absolutely no way we're going to solve reducing property taxes and increasing funding for education at the same time unless we have some new revenue stream. The idea behind the plan is that every settlement that takes place in the state of Texas, tobacco, pollution, environmental, towards 5% is paid by both parties directly to education of our children. We can increase revenues with this new tax system, and I believe it'll work. It's actually working in other states. It's called a litigation use tax. So to answer your question, we have to put more money into it. I mean, the cost of education, just like anything else, is not going down, it's going up, and it's not gonna go down. We have to do something also with property tax at the same time. But the only way out of this hole that our children have been dug into, not through any fault of their own, is to put enough money into the education system where we can adequately take care of them. And subsidizing private schools with our taxpayers' money is not probably the smartest idea when we're already in a hole.
Thank you. Ms. Bradley, your response.
I fully understand that counties and public schools get their funding from our property tax dollars. And I am certain that they're very leery of people saying that they want to eliminate property taxes. But we do need to find a viable way to provide quality public education since it is our constitutional duty.
Thank you very much. Mr. Sparks.
Yes, I believe that, as I stated in my opening remarks, that we need a plan to get rid of property tax over time and really replace that with a form of consumption tax. I really believe that all of our communities do a better job of handling their funds. And so I think it's going to be incumbent upon the state to revamp the process so that they keep those funds locally and don't have to go begging back to Austin to get those funds.
Thank you very much. And Mr. Reed.
Well, I'm a small government local control candidate, and so local control is the answer. And to your question was about how many dollars go from these wealthy districts downstate. What is accumulating in Austin is a power grab. And we want to take that away from them and bring it back to the local communities who know how better to spend their dollars per student. I don't think there's anybody in the state of Texas that would deny sending some money to Austin to help poor districts and struggling schools, because that's just the kind of people we are. So we have to look at that, and the state is going to have to prioritize. 34% of our budget already goes to education. It's one of the biggest budget items we have. And so we're going to have to look at that and prioritize, make that the number one priority, put more money in there. But it not necessarily doesn't mean not letting local control have the control they deserve.
Thank you.
There have been efforts for years for Texas to provide state funds to private schools through school vouchers. What is your position on vouchers? If you support them, would you support additional education funding, or would the funding for vouchers come from existing public school funding? We'll start with you, Ms. Bradley.
If we eliminate the property tax problem that I'm guessing we'll talk about in just a little bit, then this won't be an issue any longer, because if we have a different consumption-based tax, there'll be a different income to fund all schools. However, in the meantime, I fully understand that public school funding is a huge concern. We do need to find a viable way to provide quality public education because it is in our Constitution. I do firmly support school of choice because I am a capitalist-minded person and I support a free market. However, something that I think a lot of people aren't hearing and leave off is that if schools take state money, they will be required to follow state restrictions. Currently, homeschooling is appealing because there's not any restrictions. Private schools are appealing because there's not any restrictions. If we move to this standard, which I fully support, but you can't ask for state money. Okay.
Thank you. Mr. Sparks?
Well, I would like to correct my opponent. It's not really state money, it's the people's money. And I believe that those dollars ought to be able to follow the students. Again, as I said earlier, I really believe that the free market is really the best way to create competition and innovation in education. And I think as we look at other avenues to educate our children, I believe quality of education will go up as well as the cost of a per student education, I think, will be reduced as well.
Thank you. Ms. Bradley, would you like a 30-second rebuttal since he did mention you? Okay.
That's fine. Thank you. So I am aware that it is the people's money, but I would like to reiterate that the State Board of Education will require for any funding that is dispersed not to the public school system to be allocated for, and there will be requirements and restrictions. And I'm certain homeschool and private school sectors will not like those restrictions.
Thank you. Mr. Reed?
41 of our 45 counties are rural counties. They neither have private education or charter schools. So if you're going to represent the people of this district, it's not just for Amarillo, Midland, and Odessa. It's for all 45 counties. And so if we decide that we're going to take funds for vouchers and move it on, that leaves those school districts without those monies to provide the necessary education. Plus, as you stated, 80% of our students, new students, are in economically depressed families and situations. Most of them depend on the public school system for their breakfast and lunch. The only choice they have is homeschool. Then the state's going to have to regulate homeschool. Goes back to what Stormy said. Then the state's in our business as what we want to be separate from public education.
Thank you. Mr. Quackenbush?
Okay, so I have a little bit of experience raising children. I have 5 children, I have 9 grandchildren, and I've also had the benefit of having them enrolled at various points in their time in both private and public education. Currently, my children are enrolled in public education. I've got a 12-year-old and I've got a 9-year-old. But I also have a 40-year-old as well that went through the public education system here in Texas. So we've gone to St. Mary's, we've gone to St. Andrews and Amarillo, so we have a flavor of both of those compared to the public schools. And I think a lot of people have this misconception that simply because they're a parochial or a private school, that they're necessarily going to get a better education. When in reality, I think, in my opinion, sometimes those schools have lesser quality teachers than public. To take money away from our public education system to subsidize especially religious-based schools, not that I'm against religion, but you don't have any control after that point. You can't pick which religion gets your tax money. It could be Muslim terrorist schools. And then we have to pay for it, and there's nothing that we can do about it once we've stepped off that cliff, and it's the wrong way to go.
Let's turn our attention to mandates. Traditionally, Republicans have been philosophically supportive of local control and private sector decision-making. But in recent years, the governor has issued mandates to local communities and to businesses. Should such decisions be those of local communities and businesses or the state? Philosophically, do you believe in local or state control? And we're going to start with you, Mr. Sparks.
Sure. I believe that, a country that was founded on self-governance, that's actually at the person level. And so I think that we are an educated people and we're a compassionate people. And so I believe we can govern ourselves. And so I don't believe that either the state nor our local leaders have the right to mandate what we do as far as our own health. Like I said earlier, I think that we're a compassionate people. I believe those who were most at risk should have taken steps to protect themselves. And we don't shut people's businesses down randomly, which also has significant impact on lives.
Mr. Reed?
Well, mandates are never a good idea for anybody. We do pride ourselves in our personal responsibilities and self-initiative. We even have to ask whether or not some of those mandates were constitutional. I'm against mandates in most any form.
Mr. Quackenbush?
Okay, so if I understand the question, it's whether I'm more local control or state control. And the answer to that is absolutely 100% local control. I do not want bureaucrats in Austin that are elected, that come and go, that sometimes spend a career in the legislature, but sometimes spend a week determining what my children are going to be doing with their education on a local basis. There's no better form of control of a school than a school board that is mostly comprised of usually caring parents or grandparents that have the time, or local business people as well. They know what their school needs, they know what their children need, and we don't need Austin bureaucrats dictating that. So absolutely 100% local control.
Ms. Bradley?
I would also agree. I am 100% for local control. It's up to the citizens to choose how their communities are governed. I personally will vote against any unfunded mandates, especially those that come with deadlines and penalties every time.
Pat?
We need to take, thank you everyone for doing this. We need to take a short break and we'll be back in about 2 minutes. Thank you. Welcome back to the 31st District Senate debate, coming to you live from the Basin PBS studios in the Anwar Family Studio. I would just like to remind our candidates that the rules, as mentioned at the beginning of our program, still apply. Let's get started with our next question, and it goes as follows. 1 in 10 workers in Texas is undocumented. 40% of construction workers, that's 40% of agriculture workers, are also undocumented. And we have a chronic workforce shortage. So how would you propose maintaining border security and meeting workforce needs? Well, Mr. Reed, we'll start with you.
You want this in 1 minute, huh? We have a serious problem at the border because the federal government has acquiesced their authority down there and their responsibility. I'm going to be honest with you, there really is no easy answer how we handle the border. But what we're doing right now is a good first step, but there's a lot more that we have to do. The same thing with undocumented workers. That's a federal government problem. That becomes our problem because it overrides our education system, our health care in the rural areas. And those are things that we are going to have to look at seriously as to how we will document people on a state level.
Okay. Thank you. Mr. Quackenbush.
Okay, so we're either going to take the border situation seriously or we're not. And if we have 40% of our agricultural workforce, which is undocumented labor, that means that we have in that built-in system complicit a bunch of criminals that are employing them. My suggestion would be, let's start charging some of these people that are employing the illegal immigrants. Let's put them in jail. Let's call them a felon. I think they might think twice about hiring undocumented illegal aliens. We either have to take this seriously or not. And if we have employers out there, whether it's Tyson Foods or just a simple farm, if they're breaking the law, they're breaking the law. There shouldn't be exceptions simply because they've gotten used to it.
Thank you. Ms. Bradley.
I would just like to point out that we have the obligation to our citizens to protect America, our jobs, and our families. We can't let our humanitarian efforts undermine our safety of our country. We need to allocate funds and use whatever force necessary to secure the border. I will introduce legislation or amendments doing just that in my first term. This includes a temporary closure of the border and hitting them where it hurts economically.
Thank you. Mr. Sparks.
So Tim was exactly right. This is actually a federal problem, and it's been a federal problem for more than 30 years. Our immigration system is broken and needs to be corrected. You can't blame Republicans you have to blame Republicans and Democrats, because over that period of time, there've been times where they had the White House, Congress, and the Senate, and they didn't choose to make those corrections. We should have, in this country, a very successful guest worker program, and it's achievable. Canada's had a successful guest worker program for a lot of years. We just have to have the political will to go make that happen. We need the workers. We need that labor, as you stated in your opening statement. We're having a hard time finding workers, and so it's incumbent upon us that we push for a complete overhaul of our immigration system.
Thank you.
Forbidding the teaching of critical race theory in Texas schools was a topic of one of the recent special sessions. The bill, which has become law, limits how race-related subjects are to be taught in Texas public schools. Are you supportive of the legislation? How do you believe issues related to race, such as slavery, Jim Crow laws, school integration, etc., should be taught in public schools? We'll begin with you, Mr. Quackenbush.
I feel very, very strongly that we need to criminalize teachers who cross the line. We have a mandate from our legislature that says you are not going to do this in our public schools, but they're basically flaunting it and continuing to do it. So let's make it a third-degree felon. Take away their teaching credentials if they break the rule. What they're teaching our children is literally no less, in my opinion, dangerous than heroin. This is the Reverend Jeremiah Wright saying, "God damn America. God damn America." You want that guy and his philosophies in our public schools? You think that's healthy? There's a reason our legislature mandated against it, and the teachers that don't want to abide by it because they think that they own our children's minds need to be criminalized.
Thank you. Ms. Bradley?
Teaching history is one thing. Teaching CRT and SEL is something completely different. We have to increase penalties on educators that are doing this, and we need to support the schools that are trying to fight it.
Thank you. Mr. Sparks?
Well, I'm glad you guys brought this up, because critical race theory was the term I couldn't come up with in my opening remarks. So I am supportive of the legislation that was passed that bans that. And the reason I am is because there's a difference between critical race theory and teaching the history of our country with all of its flaws. Slavery, the way we've treated women in history, but critical race theory is different. It's systematically set up to create division between people. And so there's really no place in any of our education for something that's intentionally going to divide our country. We've taken huge steps backwards, in my opinion, in the last 15 years from where we had come after Martin Luther King said, we're going to judge somebody not by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. And that's where we need to head.
Thank you. Mr. Reed?
I would anticipate that once getting down to the Senate that I will introduce legislation that gets us back to the basics. We teach too many things in our elementary and high schools that aren't necessary in this world. Matter of fact, they're a parent's duty to teach as opposed to the school. And I think if we got back to the basics of reading and mathematics, history, and science, we would probably be better off. As everybody has said up here, if we teach history properly, there's no reason to teach a theory. That's something to be reserved for the college campus in some special course that a person has the choice to make if they want to take it. But I think if we got back to the basics in our education and what it's really meant to do, if we just focused on those things, we'd have some very smart kids.
Thank you. As mentioned in an earlier question, Texas, and particularly the Permian Basin, has a shortage of skilled workers. What is Texas doing to train the future workforce, and what would you do to improve workforce training? And we're going to start with you, Mrs. Bradley.
Yes, ma'am. Well, first of all, I think we need to partner with our colleges and take the stigma off of trade schools. I am a college-educated person, and I'm a lifelong college-educated person. I think college is critical for expanding where we're headed. You can't be the same person tomorrow that you are today. However, we put a stigma on trade schools when plumbers and electricians can make as much or more than physicians. So the first thing that I would do is reduce that stigma and put a program in place to incentivize these high school students going to college to pursue careers in hands-on fields.
Mr. Sparks.
Yeah, I think one of the reasons that we have problems in our current public education is because our students are bored. They're having to be taught to a particular test, and I think it's one of the reasons that a lot of our teachers are disenfranchised as well. So I would be in favor of removing the TOS test or the STAR test, and I really believe that we need to give our kids the tools that they need to be successful in life. I agree with Mr. Reed. I think we need to be teaching mathematics, English, and history, and civics. I think one of the reasons we're having the kind of problems in our nation is because our young people don't understand the good things about our history and in our country. So I would be in favor of teaching them the skills that they need for the occupation that they're going to seek.
Thank you. Mr. Reed.
So we've sold a fallacy to our children for the last 40 years. Today, only 35% of Americans have a college degree. That tells you that 65% of individuals out there working don't have a college degree. They have a high school diploma or less. So we have to meet them. That's why local control is so important for our school boards. We have to be meeting our students where they are. Some are geared to go to college. And I think this is the big role that the community colleges play for all of us. I think that's the key to the education system in the United States. Because they have to do two things. They have to prepare a student if they're going to go on to a four-year university, or they have to prepare a student to go into the workforce. And I think that's the key, that if our high schools work with our junior colleges and local businesses get involved in that, then we would answer that issue with the labor force.
Thank you, Mr. Quackenbush.
Okay, so the key to a labor shortage would be increased wages, increased benefits. Go back to a time possibly when these companies that need skilled laborers offer health insurance. I remember growing up as a kid, that was pretty much standard. You would get health insurance as a benefit of your job. Maybe that would incentivize kids to go into more of the labor force things you're talking about. But the last time I checked, we have a whole bunch of high schools that have shop courses still. I mean, I took 3 shop courses just to get out of high school, to get some extra credits. It's like we're teaching these types of trades if you want to be taught already in high school. I think the problem that we have is an unincentivized workforce that's pretty much turned lazy, that doesn't want to work. That's what's going on right now. McDonald's is having the same problem, and they don't rely on skilled labor, trust me. But they can't find people to work either. I mean, it's really a societal problem at this point. It's not the lack of ability or education out there for the skilled laborers. It's a need and a want. They don't want to work.
Thank you.
Because of heavy truck traffic related to the oil and gas industry, Permian Basin roads take a beating. How will you ensure adequate funding for road expansion and maintenance in West Texas? Mr. Sparks, we'll start with you.
Sure. Yeah, obviously, having grown up in Midland and seen the difference in truck traffic out here, we were just talking about that today earlier before the debate. I understand those issues, and again, when you look at what District 31 provides the state, when you look at agriculture and energy, you know, we feed and fuel the whole state, and really larger than that. So to me, as state senator, I'm going to be battling in Austin, reminding them the value, excuse me, the value that we're bringing to the whole state economy, and that both ag and energy doesn't function if we don't have safe roads to travel.
Thank you. Mr. Reed?
Being from the northern part of this district, we see the same thing with our roads with ag. And it's a huge problem for the whole district because we are so heavy in oil and gas and agriculture. I really think one of the problems down in Austin is they don't run on a sound business model. And we really should be classifying what our priorities are in our budget. And when you start looking at maybe a top 4 or 5 priorities, you know, roads are going to fall in the top 5. And that then means that more funding, if you funded those things first and then dealt with everything later on, we wouldn't need special sessions for education and for roads and bridges and for infrastructure. So maybe we just need to get a new plan down in Austin on how we do business.
Thank you. Mr. Quackenbush?
Yes, and I agree with Mr. Reed that it's really just an issue of priorities. They have all the money in the world to spend on different pet projects, but when it comes to agricultural and oil and gas roads, it's really become a public safety issue. We have truckers that are trying to avoid potholes as big as New Mexico out there, and in the process, endangering the entire motoring public. It is a public health crisis that needs to be taken care of, and you know, hopefully our next representative of the 31st District will be a strong voice to get those roads fixed. But it really is just a matter of priorities. It's not like they don't have the money to get this done. We have the money to get it done. It's just that they put us on a back burner down in Austin. They've always done that. They've always put rural and agricultural and even oil and gas on a back burner with regard to our needs, and it needs to stop. We need an advocate down there on the Senate floor that's going to put the people of this district first, including their roads for the safety of their children and their families.
And Ms. Bradley?
I think we can all agree that agriculture and oil and gas are hit with tons of regulations, tons of mandates, and are being treated like the stepchild of the federal government. I would like to clarify that the roads in our counties and our highways are funded partially from the state and partially from property taxes allocated to the counties. To best address these needs, we need to look at the budgets on both the state and local levels. It comes down to how much money these offices are wasting. Thank you.
Not just on roads, but in many areas, West Texas and the Panhandle has to compete with more populous regions of the state for state resources. Many folks believe we, west of I-35, end up with the short end of the stick. What are your plans for ensuring District 31 gets its fair share? We'll start with you, Mr. Reed.
I think that you've hit on probably the biggest equation that can't be solved right now. All right, that's why I agree with Mr. Quackenbush. We have to have a strong voice on the Senate floor, as well as our House representatives, because our voice is getting softer and softer in Austin and what our needs are. And so it's going to start first with the voices from the representatives, but also the people of the district. Remember, we represent the people and the businesses that are here, and they have to be heard in Austin on top of us.
Thank you. Mr. Quackenbush.
Well, one of the problems that we experience with incumbent Senator Seliger, unfortunately, is divisiveness amongst him and his colleagues. It's awfully hard to get perks for your district if you're fighting with everyone. I think that a new era of collegiality, of professionalism, of showing dignity and respect to our other colleagues will go a long way in helping us get things like our roads fixed and other perks. But we can't go down there and be a stick in the mud and be a pain to everybody and expect to come back and be treated nicely. That's the reason he's not here right now. is because of this animosity building. Now, he did a great job, and I really respect what he did and gave up for 17 years. But the Panhandle especially has been affected because of gerrymandering and politics. And we need to go down there and we need to build new coalitions of new friends to get what we need for the Panhandle as well as the Permian Basin.
Thank you. Ms. Bradley.
We are automatically at a disadvantage as we only have one senator and 4 or 5 representatives in this vast district of 45 counties. We need someone with integrity to hold their colleagues accountable. We also need someone with a vast experience in the various industries that our district entails to represent us very well.
Thank you. Mr. Sparks.
Yeah, I see this as really an economic and a business issue. And so when you look at, again, as I alluded to earlier, the amount of dollars that are created all across District 31, to me, it's just incumbent upon our state senator to make that voice heard on the floor. I also agree that we're going to be much more powerful if we come together as a district. And I'm very optimistic that if elected your state senator, that I'm going to be able to pull all of our conservatives together across this whole district so that we can speak as one voice in Austin.
Thank you. When he was governor of Texas, Republican George W. Bush famously befriended and worked closely with Democrat Lieutenant Governor Bob Bullock. Do you envision working with senators across the aisle to accomplish your goals for District 31? And we'll begin with you, Mr. Quackenbush.
I absolutely think it's essential that whomever on this stage is elected makes that their number one priority. We need a new era, like I said, of friendliness, congeniality, being able to work together, and also, making promises and building bonds with the people that are already there, whether it's the lieutenant governor or the governor himself. We have sort of lost track of what we need to do as patriots and as representatives of the people. It's not our right to forego what they deserve, and that means a real diplomat, a person that is going to work politically, not just with other Republicans, but with the Democrats, the independents, and the libertarians. Everyone. I mean, this great Republican Party used to be one of a big tent where everyone was accepted, where we didn't have this divisiveness where you're too moderate, you voted 90% instead of 100% with the Republicans. That's foolish. Ronald Reagan never would have won without Reagan Democrats. We need Democrats as much as they do. They need us, and we need to cooperate not just within our own party, but also with the other parties.
Ms. Bradley.
I would first like to say that we do need to work with everyone, as we are all trying to do what's best for our district, what's best for our state. To do that, there will always be opposing sides, but we can come together for the citizens of the state. And I think if we do that, we will be doing the state justice. I think we've for far too long forgotten that we serve the citizens. We seem to serve political parties, we seem to serve special interests, and we are not serving the citizens. And I would also like to say that one thing that I plan on doing when I get elected is I will be putting out a district-wide survey when I'm elected, and I will assure that every vote is in alignment with the citizen survey. And this will include Republicans and Democrats, Libertarians, Independents.
Mr. Sparks.
Well, as someone who has worked with his dad and his brothers for the last 35 years, I can tell you I understand what it means to be on opposite ends of a decision, and know that at the end of the day, we all have to figure out a way to come to a decision and then still get together at the Thanksgiving or Christmas table. So I think I have a lot of experience in that, and I agree with my colleagues here that it's really going to be incumbent upon us as a state to be able to work together in every way we can. Now, there are going to be a few issues that we're completely on opposite sides, and I'm speaking primarily with some of our Democrat friends. Some of those issues I'm not willing to give, but I would say there's really no reason why we can't be civil in our discussion and do the best we can to try and understand their side.
Thank you, Mr. Reed.
Well, as a proud Reagan Republican and running a campaign of common sense and civility, that would actually play into where I would go with this. My diplomatic tours overseas, dealing with presidents of countries, secretaries of state, and even dictators, taught me the skills that a senator would need to negotiate some of those tricky spots in legislation. And so I think that prepares me greatly for the office. Pete Laney used to start off the morning meetings of the House just after prayer, and he would remind people that today you're no longer Democrats and Republicans when we sit here and we debate. You're working for the people of the state of Texas, and everything we do in this House has to be to their benefit. That's how I will run my Senate office. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, candidates. We are now ready to hear closing remarks from each of our candidates. I would just like to remind you that each of you have 1 minute for your remarks. Mr. Reed, we'll begin with you with your closing statement.
Thank you, and thank you to all three of you for putting your name online and giving the people of this district a choice. I didn't wake up one day and decide that I was going to run for this Senate seat, and I wasn't handpicked by anybody. I have spent 30 years of my professional career preparing for this position. I took assignments in my professional career that would build my qualifications for running for public office. The things I did in my community were all geared around one thing: that our children were educated, safe, and secure. Because the children of this district and of this state are our biggest resource. And so that's what I'm going to focus on when I get down there. My name is Tim Reed. I'm running for Senate of District 31, and I would appreciate your vote.
Thank you. Mr. Quackenbush.
Thank you again for having this debate. My name is Jesse Quackenbush. I'm running for this office because I think that I'll do a great job for you as voters of the 31st District. Again, I'm the only candidate here that has a legal degree, has a legal education, and more importantly than that, has spent the last 34 years in the trenches of courts throughout this state representing families, landowners, small businesses, and workers. And those are my constituents. That's where I want to carry on with the Senate, to continue representing those people. Not big oil. When the question comes down to who do you represent on this particular issue, is it big oil or is it the people? It's going to be the people. Big insurance or the people, it's going to be the people. Big anything and the people, and it's going to be the people, the consumer, the people without a voice. You, that feel like you can't be heard by your politicians because they're too consumed with themselves. My name is Jesse Quackenbush. Go to jquackenbush4senate.com to see all of the issues and the plans that I have once elected. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Ms. Bradley, your closing statement.
Thank you. I just want to reiterate that I am an everyday, hardworking Texan. I did not inherit a family business. I am not an attorney, and I have never served my country as a civil servant. But I do get up every day and work my tail off for my family, my employees, and my community. I can assure you I will never compromise when our values are being attacked. We are the heartbeat of Texas. If we haven't had, and we haven't had strong representation in at least 16 years. We live in the greatest state, and it's about time that we have elected officials that embody that greatness. If there's one thing I've learned in life and business, it's that with great risks come great rewards. I hope to earn your vote in this primary election, and I cannot wait to show Austin and the rest of the nation what true Texas grit and integrity mean again.
Thank you. Mr. Sparks, your closing statement.
Yeah, so I believe the Texas Senate needs a patriot with good business skills to address all these issues we've talked about and others. I have over 35 years in helping run a successful business, not big oil. We're a small company. We're not unlike farmers and ranchers that are, successful small businesses. I intend to represent all of our small business community. I want to help solve our state's challenges in order to support healthy communities that give all Texans the opportunity to flourish. Proverbs 13:22 says, "A good man leaves an inheritance to his children's children." I want to leave a healthy Texas to all of our children's children. And I'm Kevin Sparks, and I am asking for your vote for Texas Senate.
You know, this has been such an incredible opportunity to bring our 4 candidates together to discuss issues that are important to our communities. Candidates, I can't thank you enough for taking the time to come to Basin PBS tonight to inform West Texas voters. We have had the pleasure of hosting numerous debates for the Permian Basin over the past few years, from mayoral to school board debates to county judges to congressional debates and so on and so on. These debates help fulfill our mission to educate and inform.
With that, we conclude tonight's debate, and we would like to thank our candidates for their participation. Early voting started today, and it continues through February the 25th. Primary election day is Tuesday, March the 1st. Check county websites for locations. We would like to again thank Mr. S. Javed Anwar and Midland Energy for graciously underwriting this debate and the others that we have had this spring. And we are always grateful for our members and for our viewers. If you would like to become a member of Basin PBS, go to basinpbs.org for all of the details about how you might do that. Also, make sure to tune in to Basin PBS on Thursday, February the 17th at 7 p.m. for our Main Street Unplugged music series, featuring this time Treaty Oak Revival. I'm Becky Ferguson, and on behalf of Basin PBS and tonight's moderators, Pat Canty and Emily Holiva, thank you and good night.